You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Vegas 70, Spann versus Krylov, preview, predictions, and analysis. UFC Vegas 70 takes place this Saturday night from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada, with a battle in the UFC light heavyweight division between top 10 ranked light heavyweight contenders in the number 6 ranked Nikita the Miner Krylov going up against the streaking contender and powerhouse at 205 pounds, finally getting his footing under him under Fortis MMA and coach Saif Sayud in the number 8 ranked Ryan Superman Spann. And then in the co-main event of the evening, you have a pivotal matchup and a great matchmaking choice in the middleweight division between the number 11 ranked Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and the only man to ever submit Ronaldo Jacare Souza inside MMA in Andre Muniz going up against Brendan All-In Allen. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, everybody. UFC Vegas 70, obviously coming off the heels of UFC Vegas 69. UFC Vegas 69 was a decently successful card for me. You know, I want to make sure that going into this year, I don't ever have just like a super shitty card. And I know that that's, you know, kind of asking for mission impossible, because you're always going to have those cards, whether it's betting, whether it's just predictions, where you're just off. And, you know, I had a few of those in 2022. I feel like I started the year off pretty well. Then I kind of went on a little bit of a downward spiral. Then I kind of came back and then I went down again. And I want to make sure that 2023 for me is a overall successful year. I think overall between every app that I used to bet on for MMA and the UFC last year, which I didn't even start betting until I believe May of 2022, I think I ended up with like plus 7 or 8 units for the entire year. I think I was up around $700 or $800 in total. Could have been a little bit higher. I actually thought I was doing a lot worse, but there were some nights where I did very well, especially at the end of the year with UFC 282. I ended up coming up with like 15 units profit on the whole card, 15 unit profit. When it comes to this year, though, you know, let's look at UFC Vegas 69. I had some pretty solid calls on there. If you go back and listen to the podcast, if you go onto the YouTube channel and check out the betting tips video that I put out, which I'm going to be doing for this card as well, but it's a little bit harder to find good betting spots on this card, I feel like, than it was last week's. But these cards have some similarities with like the Dana White Contender Series guys, the former Ultimate Fighters. And, you know, it's not the easiest card to predict and definitely not the easiest card to put your money on. But, you know, we had Clayton Carpenter by submission. We had AJ Fletcher inside the distance. I did pick Jessica Andrade. And going into that main event, I was either breaking even or a little bit up. I put a couple more parlays together for like 0.2 units, and those ended up failing on me because in a lot of those, I ended up putting the under 2.5 for Jordan Wright and Zach Pauga. And I think a lot of people there would agree with me that they thought for sure that it was going to go under 2.5. I mean, most of Jordan Wright's fights in general don't make it out of the second round. And it was just Zach Pauga just getting into the clinch, the over-under position, the double undercook clinch position, putting Jordan Wright up against the cage and controlling the position. And I mean, and that was the gist of the fight. You know, there's always those fights where you think it's going to go one way and it doesn't. And then Hussein Askabov, man, came in undefeated. And I said in the lead up that like it's always these undefeated guys that like you got to be worried about. But going off the tape I studied on Askabov going into the fight with Emmers, I knew Emmers was going to be a difficult matchup. I didn't think that Askabov was going to have like a supremely easy time here, and that's why I didn't bet him in everything. But I did have him in a couple parlays, and he busted them for me as well. Sadikov came up big with that TKO doctor stoppage. Apparently, Evan Elder was up 2-0 going into the third, so we could have had a really shitty night if Sadikov didn't get the win there, but he ended up getting the win by TKO. But I mean, I had Clayton Carpenter by sub, AJ Fletcher inside the distance. I said if Blanchfield was going to get the job done, the minute she got Andrade to the floor, she was going to get the job done. That's what I had predicted. But if it stayed on the feet, I thought Andrade was going to be able to outstrike her. And dude, I mean, Blanchfield looked good on the feet, good stance switch combinations, really loose with her striking in a good way. Like, she's not loose in terms of being lazy. She just knows how to throw her punches and kicks and, pair them together and really flow well on the feet. She's got a very good striking flow, but the minute she got in on the hips of Andrade and was able to take her to the ground, she snatched up the neck and got the rear naked choke in round 2. And so I put a little bit of money on Blanchfield. I wanted to take Blanchfield by sub, but I went on DraftKings a little bit too late, and I wasn't able to get the sub line because the fight was just about to start, so they locked it. But I wanted to take Blanchfield by sub at plus 350, and I actually had her in a couple parlays by submission. I think I had her in 2 that I put just to kind of double up on the main event, and I wasn't able to get it, but I was able to double my money about 0.35 units to 0.7 units on the main event. So that 0.7 paired with the 1.3 unit win on another parlay we had early in the night was able to make that week. I think I was down a little bit. I think I was down like minus 0.2 units, but I'll take it. It was kind of a chalky card. I feel like a lot of people lost some big bets on that card, and it wasn't the easiest card to predict overall. So, to only lose 0.2 units, I'll take that heading into this week. And, on this card, UFC Vegas 70, this again isn't the easiest card to predict. I think there's a lot of fights where you can see them going one way drastically or the other way drastically. And I feel like that's kind of the story of how these fights are going to go. You have the return of Tatiana Suarez. She's been out for almost 4 years coming into this fight night, and very high on Tatiana Suarez. A lot of people. She has a dominant TKO victory over the former strawweight champion in Carla Esparza. She's just a dominant wrestler, a dominant grappler with vicious ground and pound, but she's been gone for 3 years. I like the test against Montana De La Rosa. I think De La Rosa is a good fight to get Tatiana Suarez back in the mix, and I think Montana De La Rosa is a little bit less sharpened version of a Tatiana Suarez, and that's another fight and that's another case with a fight on the card when it comes to O'Day Osborne and Charles Johnson. I feel like O'Day Osborne's a little bit of a less polished version of the Inner G. But yeah, let's get into the card. Not the best card overall, but there are some really solid matchups on it from top to bottom. And we're going to kick it off in the prelims in the lightweight division. We're going to kick it off with Rafael "the Turn" Alves, who comes into the fight with a record of 20 victories and 11 losses, going up against the undefeated Contender Series winner in Nurullo Aliev. Nurullo Aliev going up against Rafael Alves in his UFC debut. Can he improve to 9-0, or will Alves turn the tables on Aliev? Look, this is a tough fight. I don't think this is an easy fight for Nurullo Aliev at all. And I think a lot of people seeing the undefeated record, kind of like the Hussein Askabov story last week, you have to take into consideration the level of competition that these guys have fought before. And Nurullo Aliev, I believe, is 23 years old, 24 years old. Like, the guy has not been around MMA for too long, but he's a multiple-time wrestling champion, I believe. He's a master of sport in, I think, amateur wrestling. It was either amateur wrestling or sambo. He's a master of sport. The only other master of sport in the UFC and in MMA that I can think of is Peter Yan, who is a master of sport in boxing. So, this isn't the easiest fight for Nurullo Aliev. Like, it's not easy at all. And the first round is going to tell us a lot, because the thing about Rafael Alves is he might be on a little bit of a losing streak here, a little bit of a skid. A lot of people will call him a round one or bust fighter. Like, he'll come in and either he gets you out of there in the first round, he puts you out, or if he can't put you out, he's going to get tired and, you're going to finish him or be able to grind him out for a decision. That's kind of the story of Rafael Alves. But when you look at Rafael Alves, he's 20 victories with 11 losses. And like I said, Nurullo Aliev, again, undefeated, coming off the Contender Series. A lot of people call him the Tibetan Eagle. I believe his nickname is the Tibetan Eagle. A lot of people, Khabib 2.0, saying that he's a more well-rounded version of Khabib. I'm not going to give the kid that much credit yet. But when you look at Alves' record, he's got 15 victories out of 20 wins coming by way of finish, 40% win rate via submission, 8 submissions, 7 KO TKOs, and 5 wins by decision. Out of his losses, he's been submitted 6 times, TKO'd 4 times, and lost decision one time. So, I mean, the guy is a finish or be finished fighter. Like I said, 15 out of 20 wins come by way of finish, 10 out of 11 losses, Alves is getting finished. This is the thing. I know a lot of people are talking about Nurullo Aliyev, saying that his striking is crisp, his striking is clean. He has decent striking, but on the feet, man, I favor Rafael Alves all day. I think his speed, his power, his explosiveness. Alves has huge power, and he's not bad technically. A lot of the time when you get guys that have really solid power, they make up for it, or they kind of cancel it out with a lack of technique and just throw bombs at your moms because they're just trying to get you out of there as quick as they can. Alves has good kicking technique. I mean, you look at the fight against Drew Dober. He opened up one of the rounds with a spinning capoeira roundhouse kick, a hand plant roundhouse kick. He'll throw spinning wheel kicks. I mean, even when he throws his wide punches, the wide right and left hooks, like he has the other hand up. He's throwing solid combinations. But the thing is, with that speed, with that explosiveness, with that fast twitch muscle, you tend to not have the best gas tank. And if you can survive the early storm against Rafael Alves, that's where the fighters and his opponents can take over. That's what we saw against Demiris Magulov. He had a pretty competitive fight with Demiris Magulov, landed some decent shots on the feet. Didn't hurt him at any point, but was able to survive the grappling. But once he got taken down, man, Demiris Magulov was just able to take the wind out of Alves. He's a big, muscular guy. He's very fast. His head movement is unbelievable. You look at the fight with Drew Dober, I mean, landed a beautiful left hook on the chin, and then he's slipping, rolling, moving out of the way, and then he busts into a breakdance move up against the cage. When Rafael Alves is on, he's a very dangerous fighter in this division. Going up against Nurullo Aliyev, I think if Aliyev thinks that he's better on the feet and plays the striking game for too long, he can get knocked out. I definitely think Rafael Alves can knock him out. I think he can jump on his neck and grab a guillotine. I mean, you look at the fight with Drew Dober again. I'm going to use this as a good example when breaking down the fight because Drew Dober's on a win streak. And yeah, Alves was one of the victims, but Alves had some good moments in that fight. He has weakness to the body, but his kicks, his punches, his speed, his defense, he has very good lateral movement. That's one thing I noticed about Rafael Alves is he's very good at circling and turning off the cage, cutting angles, using the triangle step, using the lateral movement. Like the guy doesn't stand stationary. And I think he's pretty aware defensively to the point where, yes, Aliyev isn't a bad striker. He has decent technique, but I don't think Aliyev is going to want to play around on the feet with Rafael Alves. I just really don't see that as being a successful avenue for Aliyev to win the fight. However, if he gets in on the clinch, takes down Rafael Alves, gets in the half guard, gets into the full guard, stacked guard, works to side control. His ground and pound is vicious. And that's a place where we've seen Rafael Alves have trouble in the past. He's had trouble getting taken down, getting controlled on the mat, getting grounded and pounded, potentially locking himself up or losing position and getting submitted. I mean, like I said, 6 out of 11 losses come by way of submission. I think if anybody can submit Rafael Alves, it's going to be Nurullo Aliyev. He's got good takedowns, really good changing of direction with the takedown attempts, head on the inside single, head on the outside, body lock trips, inside trips, outside trips. If Aliyev gets Rafael Alves to the ground, I definitely think he can outpace him. He can beat him up, land elbows, land heavy hammer fists, and just really outpace Rafael Alves on the mat. And that's kind of where I see the fight taking place. I think Alves is going to have some decent success early on. I think he will land some big shots. I think he might even hurt Aliyev at one point and rock him. But I think eventually Aliyev's going to get in on the hips. He's going to take him down. In the second round, he's going to be piecing him up. He's going to be beating him up with the ground and pound from inside the guard, past the half guard, potentially get to the full mount, land some hammer fists, some elbows. I mean, the guy is relentless with his ground and pound pressure. And it's not just the fact that he doesn't throw strikes and looks to gain control time. When he's getting this control time, he'll posture up and he will barrage on you with big, heavy strikes, elbows, punches, hammer fists. I mean, you name it, the guy's going to be throwing it at you. Just look at his Contender Series fight. I mean, the minute he got this kid down to the ground and was able to control, he just beat the living shit out of him. And then that's kind of what I see here. I think Aliev will eventually get it on the hips of Alves. I don't think this is going to be an easy fight. I don't think Aliev's going to walk right through Rafael Alves. And I think on the feet, Alves is a very dangerous competitor for Nurullo Aliev. I think he's very, very dangerous. And I think he could knock him out. He could stun him, grab a hold of the neck and the front headlock and lock up a guillotine choke. I think that those are all live options here, but I'm going to go with the grappling pace, the ground and pound pressure, and the overall activity of Nurullo Aliev on the ground to eventually just wear out Rafael Alves, who has a suspect gas tank, and we've seen it throughout his career. I'm going to go with a finish for Nurullo Aliev. I know a lot of people are going to be heavy on trying to bet Aliev, especially at like a minus 180, minus 190, being an undefeated fighter, but we kind of saw that with the minus 125 on Hussein Askabov last week. And going into the fights this week, I'm not going to tell you that that's a good idea to put all of your stock into this undefeated Contender Series alum. We've heard of the Dana White Tuesday night Contender Series fade. I don't necessarily think Aliev is a person you want to fade, but I think overall when it comes to this fight, I would stay away from it in terms of picking a side, but I do like the under 2.5 rounds if that line does come out. I'm actually going to check right now to see. I don't think they have an under 2.5. I think they have an under 1.5, and at that point, I don't necessarily like it, but I think it is an option. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, no. So the under 2.5 is minus 115. I actually really like that. I think the under 2.5 is the best play for the fight. So if you're going to play this fight at all, I would say take the under 2.5 at minus 115. I don't see it going the distance. I think the grappling, top pressure, wrestling, and ground and pound of Aliev is going to eventually just wear out Alves. And if not, Alves is going to catch Aliev with a big shot on the feet and knock him out. I mean, that's kind of how I see the fight playing from either side. So the best bet in terms of the fight is the under 2.5 rounds at minus 115. But my overall pick for this fight, I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliev to win via a late second round TKO. I think just the ground and pound pressure, he's going to get him down, wear him out, and just eventually ground and pound him, land a bunch of punches, elbows, hammer fists, etc., and get him out of there. So my pick is Nurullo, the Tibetan Eagle Aliev, to defeat Rafael Alves via second round TKO victory. But I like the under 2.5 at minus 115 for the best play on this fight for the card. All right, and up next, we have another fight on the prelims, this time at a catchweight bout. I'm guessing it's going to be at like 130 pounds between UFC flyweights. A really, really interesting matchup between O'Day, the Jamaican sensation Osborne, who comes into the fight with the record of 11 victories, 5 defeats, and 1 no contest, going up against Charles Energy Johnson, who comes back with a record of 13 victories and only 3 defeats. When I look at this fight, I see two fighters that fight very similar. Like, I feel like O'Day Osborne and Charles Johnson are very similar in the way they approach the game. They're very poke and prod on the feet, kind of picking their shots, moving around, touch and go. I think O'Day's a little bit more of a touch and go fighter because he lacks the power that Johnson has. I also feel like O'Day lacks a little bit of technique with his punching game, but he can catch you at awkward angles and hurt you at certain points. Going into the fight with O'Day Osborne and Tyson Nam, I said that I thought there was definitely a possibility that O'Day Osborne would get caught on the chin, but I figured he was just going to touch and go, keep him at bay, keep away from him, not throw anything stupid, and then he wouldn't get caught by Tyson Nam. Well, one flying knee from in too close a range as Tyson Nam faded off to his rear side and landed an overhand right, and then a follow-up on the ground shut everything down that I was saying because O'Day Osborne got knocked out. Now, O'Day Osborne did defeat Zaruka Dashev. He actually finished him, I believe it was inside the first round or somewhat close to the first round. He was able to get him out of there. Let's see. Round 1, 1 minute and 1 second into the first round, he got him out of there. But Zaruka Dashev, I think his record is just awful. What is his overall record, right? Real quick. I'm going to pull it up as long as it'll work. He's 4-4. He finished a guy in the first round, but he's 4-4 overall as a pro. 2 wins by KO, 2 wins by submission, 2 losses by KO, 1 loss by submission, and 1 loss by decision. Something about those guys with the nickname The Lion. I don't know, man. Hussein Askabov, Zaruka Dashev, something's going on with that Lion nickname, I feel like. But he loses to Tyson Nam, gets knocked out. He gets knocked out in the first round with a flying knee and then ground and pound by Manel Kape. Manel Kape has shown to be very, very successful in the UFC flyweight division. Very close split decision loss to Mateus Nicolau, but he's competitive in every fight that he's in, and he wins a lot of them. And then he knocks out Jerome Rivera in 26 seconds of the first round. Rivera's not even in the UFC anymore. He gets submitted with a guillotine choke by Brian Kelleher. I was a big fan of Brian Kelleher at a certain point, but, going into how Kelleher's success has been lately, I mean, that loss doesn't look that great. 11-5 overall, 2 losses by way of knockout. So out of his 5 losses, he's been knocked out twice, been submitted a few times as well, I believe. And you look at Charles Johnson, the Inner G, former LFA flyweight champion, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. I look at these fighters so much, sometimes I feel like I mix things together. But Charles Johnson, like I said, they're very similar in the way that they fight, O'Day and Charles. But Charles is sharper. Charles has more power. He's more dangerous on the feet. He moves better with his boxing. I feel like his boxing combinations are a lot crisper. His overall technique is a lot crisper. O'Day Osborne has decent technique, but he kind of throws himself off balance, throws wild shots, leaves his chin up in the air. Johnson, even though it looks like he's leaving his chin in the air to get countered, he's very good defensively at circling, using lateral movement, slipping and rolling out of the way. He has a deceptively good head movement, and I feel like the wide shots of O'Day Osborne aren't going to be there. If O'Day wants to win this fight, it's going to have to be 1-2s down the middle and using that front kick to the body. We saw him use the front kick to the body against Tyson Nam, but the thing is, Charles Johnson has very good teep kicks, knees to the body, elbows as well, and he's very good at range with front kicks, roundhouse kicks, low kicks. I think he's just sharper, and I think Charles Johnson is just sharper all the way around as a mixed martial artist. 13 wins, 3 losses, 9 wins by way of finish, 4 decisions, and 3 losses, all coming by way of decision. Charles Johnson has never been finished, and I don't necessarily see an avenue where O'Day Osborne's going to outstrike Charles Johnson for 15 minutes. The only thing I can see is that a lot of Charles Johnson's fights, like the win over what's his name? Why can I not think of his name? Zolgas Zumagulov was a split decision. He lost to Muhammad Mokaev, got out grappled. He TKO'd Jimmy Flick. But the fight against Zolgas was very close, and I feel like the way that Johnson fights, until he picks up on a rhythm, he makes the fights a lot closer than they should be, and going up against a guy who's a poke and prodder who has a similar style to Johnson and Osborne, I feel like he could make it look closer than it needs to be on the scorecards. But I also fade the durability of O'Day Osborne. I think his defense is just completely lacking. I think he's there to be countered. He's there to be hit. And like I said, Johnson is the more well-rounded fighter. He's the sharper fighter. He's better technically in every aspect of the game. And I think O'Day's just a little too wild, and his defense just isn't there. And when I see a fighter whose defense is really lacking against a sharp striker like Charles Johnson, even though he might not up the volume until later on in the fight or later in the rounds, I still feel like he's going to be able to touch O'Day Osborne whenever he wants to. He's going to be able to land the punches. He's going to be able to land the kicks. And if he needs to, he can close the distance and get into boxing range. And boxing range with Charles Johnson against O'Day Osborne is a bad time, I believe. And I just feel like Johnson's the better fighter here. He's favored at a minus 190 on the money line, I believe. I'm going to check that out real quick. Where's it at? Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. I believe he's minus 190, right? Oh, minus 170. So he's a minus 170 on the money line. I know people going off of, that win over Jimmy Flick, he gets a TKO, but Flick had been gone for a while. I figured that Johnson would be able to finish that fight, and I picked him there. I know he had that loss to Mokaev, but I actually really like Johnson at 125 pounds. I think he's going to have a lot of success in the UFC, and I really think he can do very well, and I think he's going to improve to 3-1 in the UFC here and defeat O'Day Osborne. I wouldn't necessarily say to pick Johnson to win by a finish, but based on the lack of defense and the defensive irresponsibility and the fact that O'Day is there to get hit, I feel like it's definitely possible that O'Day gets caught and gets finished. We've seen him get knocked out. We've seen him get hurt before. We've seen him get submitted. We've seen him be finished in his MMA career, and Johnson's never been put away. And I don't think O'Day's going to pick apart Johnson for 15 minutes. So my pick is going to be Charles the Energy Johnson at a minus 170 on the money line. to defeat O'Day Osborne. I'm actually going to go with a late second round TKO. I think eventually he's just going to be able to put those combinations on him. He has more power than O'Day. He has more knockout upside than O'Day Osborne, but O'Day can definitely pick him apart and throw that really awkward front kick to the body. He almost throws it like a roundhouse kick and then stabs it in like a teep right at the end. I think the body work of O'Day Osborne can give Johnson some trouble, but Johnson's just going to be the overall more well-rounded fighter, and he's eventually going to be able to close that distance and land the shots that he needs to, and he's going to be better defensively. And if you're better defensively against a guy who lacks defense and always also throws a little bit wild, he's going to be there to be hit on counters, and I think Johnson's counter game is going to be sharp. So I'm going to go with Charles the Energy Johnson to improve to 14-3 and 3-1 overall in the UFC via a late second round TKO over O'Day Osborne. When it comes to the betting market, I don't love this fight from a betting perspective anywhere, but if I'm going to tell you to play one thing, I like Charles Johnson on the money line at a -170. He was a little bit higher at like a -190 earlier in the week, I believe, and a little bit of money seems to have come in on Charles Johnson, or on O'Day Osborne, I'm sorry. So I'm going to say if you're going to play the fight, play Johnson on the money line at -170. But other than that, I don't really like any aspect of the fight in terms of a betting perspective. But Charles the Energy Johnson over O'Day the Jamaican sensation Osborne via second round TKO. Our next fight comes to us in the UFC welterweight division in a battle between Contender Series alum in Mike Proper Malott, who comes in with a record of 8 victories, 1 loss, and 1 no contest, going up against the Canadian Johan White Lion Liness, who comes back with a record of 9 victories and 1 defeat. I think this is a really solid matchup. Both guys fought on the Contender Series. Mike Malott won with a vicious first-round guillotine. Trains out of Team Alpha Male in Sacramento and definitely knows his way around the guillotine chokes. The master of the guillotine and guillotine defense in Team Alpha Male. They get a hold of your neck, it's a wrap for almost anybody. At least it was at a certain point. I feel like that's less of the case now in the UFC. And then Johan the White Lion Liness, 9-1 overall as a professional mixed martial artist. The thing with Mike Malott is the dude is kill or be killed. And so is Johan Liness. Like, both of these guys, they're going to come out and they're going to look to put you away. I feel like Mike Malott has a better grappling upside in terms of the submission game, but I think Johan Liness's takedown defense and his ability to get back up if he does get taken down is heavily underrated. Like, Liness is not an easy guy to take down. He's not an easy guy to get down. He has very solid takedown defense. You saw that in the fight against Darian Weeks, where he won via split decision. You saw that in the fight against Gabe Green even before he got finished. Like, he has good takedown defense. And the one thing that Johan Liness has is big power. Mike Malott is 8-1. He's got 4 wins by KO, TKO, 4 wins by submission. His only loss was a knockout loss to Hakeem Dawodu, which I believe was still at 170 pounds. But if you look at Hakeem, he's all the way down at 145 pounds. This loss came back in October of 2014 at WSOF 14. That's obviously a long time ago, and both guys are going to be different fighters. But a loss to a guy at 145 pounds does worry me coming into this fight. But I also know that if somebody's going to be able to push the pace and keep the gas tank going, I'm going to go with Mike Proper Malott to be able to keep up his pace, to be able to push the pace, and to be able to win that second and third round. Johan Liness can fight technically, but after the midpoint in the second round, I mean, I feel like he just falls off a cliff. But he has that gift that's also a curse, the blessing into a curse, which is the big, heavy knockout power. The guy has unbelievable power where the punches don't look crisp, they don't look technical, but he's able to put you down. I mean, look at the shot he caught Gabe Green with before he lost that fight. Caught him with a right hand right over the ear and dropped him. Looked like he was out cold, and he woke up when he hit the mat. And then Liness tried to finish, didn't get the finish, and then got finished himself. But Liness fights pretty technical. It's just his punching game, his boxing isn't the best. I feel like he's a little loopy, a little sloppy. Mike Malott has better technical boxing, and I feel like Liness may be a better kicker in terms of attacking the inside low kicks, the outside low kicks, using feints to set up the angles to attack the low kicks, and use his kicking game to keep the range and distance. When you look at the height, Mike Malat's going to have a 2-inch height advantage at 6'1" to 5'11" for Johan Lainez, but Lainez is going to come back with a 2.5-inch reach advantage at 75.5 inches compared to a 73-inch reach for Mike Proper Malat. Look, I think Malat is the better fighter. It's just, can he survive the power of Johan Lainez in the first round? If Malat can survive the first round and put the combinations, put the kicking game together, use the grappling, and really outwork Johan Lainez, I think he can get him out of there in the second round. But the White Lion is going to roar in that first round. And it's going to be a dangerous first round for both guys. But due to the fact that Mike Malat got knocked out by a guy who fought at 145 pounds in the UFC and used to fight at 145 pounds, like, it's a 145 pounder. Even if he fought at 170 when he fought Malat, I don't like that, man. Because yes, Hakeem has a lot of power, but you know, Hakeem hasn't knocked out a ton of people in his UFC career either. I mean, he knocked out Yoshinori Horie, I believe, and that guy has done nothing in the UFC. And he got knocked out by somebody else, I believe. I could be wrong. Maybe it was Peter. No, it wasn't Peter Yan who knocked him out. Somebody else knocked out Yoshinori Horie inside the UFC. And I don't know, man. Like, I feel like Malat's better technically. He can use the wrestling. He's got much better submissions. But Lainez goes for the front chokes as well. When he hurts you, if you stand up awkwardly, he's going to go for that front choke. He's going to go for the guillotine, and he's going to try to put you out. He's going to try to get a hold of your neck and rip that neck. Mike Malat has decent kicking offense. His boxing is technically good, technically solid, but then if you look at his fight in the UFC against Mickey Gall is not a good striker. Yes, he knocked down Sage Northcutt with a Stockton slap, basically, and locked up a submission, but his striking is not good, and he was kind of piecing up Mike Malat before Malat was landing the big counters, but Malat is a good counter striker. But the long range, the distance control of Lainez, I think it's going to be a little bit harder for Mike Malat to close the distance with his hooks, with his uppercuts, with his straight punches. Very solid left hook from Malat, good straights, good inside and outside low kicks, good high kicks. We saw him land a good high kick in the fight against Mickey Gall to start off 1-2 into a high kick. He's technically solid on the feet. I feel like he's a better technical striker on the feet, but I feel like Lainez has more power, and I worry about the chin of Mike Malat. Yes, he's undefeated in his pro MMA career, but I mean, the guy is a banger. Like the guy, or not undefeated in his pro career, but he hasn't really suffered any losses in the UFC. He's undefeated in the UFC. Malat's got solid boxing. Lainez is going to be the bigger power puncher, and it's just, can he survive the power of Lainez in the first round? Can he hurt Lainez? Can he drag him into the deep waters and eventually get him out of there? Because I don't see this fight going the distance either way. It's either going to be Lainez landing that big bomb of a right hand on Mike Malat, hurting him and putting him away, whether it's a flash KO, whether it's a one-punch knockout, or whether it's a rock and then going into the ground and pound to get the TKO, or is Mike Malat going to be able to pick apart Lainez, get inside on the boxing range, land the hooks, the uppercuts, the straight punches down the middle, and eventually land a big bomb on the chin of Lainez and put him out of there after Lainez gets tired? I think this is going to be a car crash head on. Both these guys are going to come out looking for the finish early on. I want to go with Mike Malat because I feel like he's more well-rounded. I feel like he has better jiu-jitsu, but it's also not easy to take Lainez down. But once he gets tired, the takedowns, the front chokes, the guillotine system, the ground and pound, that's all going to be there for Mike Malat. And I think Malat has better takedowns and better wrestling offense and defense than Lainez. But Lainez showcased good takedown defense, and even when he got taken down, was able to work his way back up to the feet. I see a lot of people riding with Mike Malat in this fight, and I don't see a ton of people giving Johan Lainez a lot of credit because the fight with Darian Weeks that he won by split decision was so close, and a lot of people didn't believe he did enough to win that fight. But I thought it was very close, and I'm not mad at the decision. But I also had Lainez in a bet that night, so you know, maybe I'm biased, but I just went back and rewatched it, and it was a very closely contested fight, and Weeks didn't do much of anything, but when he did come forward, he was able to hurt him. I like the power of Malat. I also like the right hand and the power that Lainez possesses. I like the finishing ability of Lainez. I don't like the gas tank of Johan Lainez. I feel like the gas tank and the cardio more goes on the side of proper Mike Malat. This is a really tough fight to call, and I know a lot of people are heavy on Mike Malat going into this one, thinking he's just the overall more well-rounded fighter. He has a better gas tank. He's better technically, and all those things are correct. but I keep thinking about the fact that he got knocked out by a guy who's a 145-pounder in the UFC, and on that front also hasn't showcased a ton of knockout power in his UFC career, but he is a good technical striker. But he kind of got picked apart and almost finished by Julian Juicy J. Arosa, who, yes, has good power, but I mean, that guy's a 145-pounder as well, and Malott got caught and got finished. So I feel like this should be a pick'em. Mike Malott should definitely not be a minus 215. And I honestly like the shot on the dog here, but I wouldn't bet it just because of the gas tank and the cardio issues that Lioness has showcased. He's kind of a round one or bust fighter. Malott, I feel like, can push the pace a little bit more. But originally, I was going to go with Mike Malott going into this prediction podcast. I just felt like he was sharper all the way around and had more ways to win. But I think Lioness is going to find the chin, man. I'm going to go with the underdog. And maybe I'm screwing myself over here, but I'm going to go with Johan Lioness to improve to 10-1. He's a plus 185 dog. I just keep thinking about that knockout loss to Hakeem Dawodu. And yes, it was like 9 years ago. But, man, a 145-pounder in the UFC who hasn't showcased a ton of knockout power. I mean, he was kind of getting touched up by Mickey Gall in the fight, even though he was landing good counters, even though he did knock him out. He was getting his face bloodied up, getting pushed back, getting hit with some good shots from Gall, who's nowhere near a good striker. So I think Lioness is going to find a home for that right hand, drop Mike Malott, and get him out of there. So my pick is going to be Johan the White Lion Lioness to improve to 10-1 via a first-round knockout over Mike Proper Malott. Betting-wise, I like fight doesn't go to decision, or if they give you a line on the under 2.5, that's what I would play. If you want to play the Johan Lioness side, he's at plus 185, or you could play Lioness by TKO, but those odds haven't come out yet. I honestly feel like you should stay away from this fight from a betting perspective all the way around, because I could see it going either way. Like I said, even though the odds have Mike Malott at a 2-1 favorite, I believe this is more of a pick'em than people are giving each of these fighters credit for. So I would take under 2.5 rounds or fight doesn't go to decision, but I'm going to go with the underdog in the plus 185 Johan Lioness to defeat Mike Malott via first round knockout. All right, up next is going to be a battle in the women's flyweight division with the return after almost 4 years of the female Khabib in Tatiana Suarez, undefeated in professional mixed martial arts and 9 victories and no defeats, going up against another solid striker, a really good submission artist and grappler in her own right in Montana De La Rosa, who comes back with a record of 12 victories, 7 losses, and 1 draw. The draw coming against Mayra Bueno Silva, who just had a very, very good performance in her last fight this past weekend, getting that heel hook submission. Listen, the odds on this fight are insane. I mean, you have Tatiana Suarez as like a minus 750, minus 800 favorite. To Montana De La Rosa at a plus 540. She'll probably get close to minus 900 by the time fight night rolls around in the side of Tatiana Suarez. Montana De La Rosa probably closer to plus 700 by the time Saturday comes. But man, as much as I would tell you to take a shot on the underdog in Montana De La Rosa, I think this is going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be competitive. But I also think that the areas that De La Rosa are sharp in, the area where she showcases her, ability in terms of the jiu-jitsu, the grappling, the takedowns, the top pressure, the control, I don't see any of that really being there against a girl in Tatiana Suarez. Suarez is strong. She's powerful. And it's not the fact that she just gets these takedowns. She's very good at using misdirection with her takedown attempts. She'll get in on the body lock. She'll get to the head on the inside single. She'll circle you one way and then drag you back the other way to get the takedown. Or she'll circle you one way and then outside trip your leg, inside trip you, get you up against the cage. She's very good at circling and using misdirections with her takedown attempts, where she'll bring you one way and then drag you back the other to take out your base and kind of play mind games with you in terms of how you think you're going to defend the takedown. And then once you whizzer and defend, she'll outside trip you, drag you back. It's like a drag, re-drag style of takedown and misdirection. She's very good at it. And once she gets you on the floor, whether it's in the full guard, whether it's in the half guard, I mean, Tatiana Suarez is going to beat you up. And I don't really see anything being too different against Montana De La Rosa. Like, she's going to be competitive off of her back. She's going to have the submission threats. She's going to have good takedown ability of her own right. I think on the feet, I would give the striking edge slightly to Montana De La Rosa. I think she has better combinations. Her punches are better technically, good straights, good hooks, good ability to put the combinations together on the feet. But it's the fact of, are you going to be able to keep Tatiana Suarez away from your hips? And once she does get in on your hips, are you going to be able to stop the takedowns? I don't think De La Rosa is going to be able to stop the takedowns. And we saw against Mayra Bueno Silva, like, the longer you're able to get back up to your feet, stop the takedowns, whizzer kick your way back up, work your way up on the cage and circle back to the center, get the underhooks, get the overhooks, and break away from the clinch. The more you make Montana De La Rosa work, the worse she's going to look the longer the fight goes. Like, she's going to get tired. Her cardio's not going to hold up. But she still pushes forward. She's got that dog in her. Montana De La Rosa is a dog. Don't let that 12-7 record fool you. Like, she's going to make this a fight. She's going to make this competitive, at least early on. But the longer the fight goes, the wrestling, the takedowns, the top pressure, the ground and pound of Tatiana Suarez, I think the ground and pound is going to be the biggest weapon of the quote-unquote female Khabib here. Even if she's in half guard, if she's in the full guard, if she works her way to side control, those elbows, the hammer fists. I mean, when she took down Carla Esparza, the former strawweight champion, she beat the living shit out of Carla Esparza. And yes, Carla Esparza survived. Yeah, she was able to work her way back up to the feet at some points. Yeah, she was able to get some reversals the longer the fight went. But she got beat up. Like, Suarez is strong. She has big power in her ground and pound, good ability to lock up submissions. And I think De La Rosa is strong. I think she's tough. I think you can't let that record fool you. 12-7-1. People are going to look at her and think this is just a lamb being led to the proverbial slaughter, which I completely understand. But at the same time, like, look at the caliber of opponents that Montana De La Rosa is losing to. Out of her 7 losses, she's only been submitted or KO'd 1 time. So 2 out of 7 losses by way of finish, and the rest come by way of decision. Out of her 12 victories, she has 8 victories by way of submission and 3 by decision and 1 by KO TKO. So 9 out of 12 victories come by way of finish for Montana De La Rosa. But she lost to Macy Barber via unanimous decision. She beat Ariane Lipsky via second round TKO. She went to a draw with Mayra Bueno Silva, which, judging off the fight she just had this past weekend, which I believe that was her, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm positive that it was. I think Mayra Bueno Silva is a phenomenal fighter, and I think she has a big upside in her MMA career. She's 10-2. I think she has a good upside, and she went to draw with Mayra Bueno Silva. I think that's something you have to look at here. I mean, sorry, let's see if I can get this to load before we continue. Lost to Viviane Araujo, who's pretty, talented in her own right. She beat Mara Romero Barella, which, you don't really have to talk about that too much. Lost to Andrea Lee via unanimous decision. But I mean, Andrea Lee, Viviane Araujo, Mayra Silva, Ariane Lipsky, Macy Barber, like, she's not losing to cans, and she's doing pretty well even in the fights where she's losing. She always makes it competitive. She's a dog. She's determined. She's going to try to win the fight. She's not going to be overwhelmed and, just walk in defeated. Like, Montana De La Rosa is going to make Tatiana Suarez work. She's going to make her earn this victory. And judging on the fact she has 8 wins by way of submission, I think that, she's going to have something to offer Tatiana Suarez in the grappling, but she's not as good of a wrestler as Tatiana, and that's where Tatiana shines. She's the female Khabib, like we already said. She's able to get these takedowns. She's able to drag and re-drag, inside and outside trip, and once she gets you to the ground, it's very difficult to get up. However, her last fight, which we already mentioned, was in June of 2019 at UFC 238. So she hasn't fought in the UFC in almost 4 years. It has been almost 4 years since we've seen Tatiana Suarez. A lot of health issues. I believe she had cancer at one point, thyroid cancer. I could be wrong. But a lot of health issues, a lot of things that she was finally able to get healthy and finally make her way back. But will that 4-year layoff take a toll on Suarez? I think it will. I do think that, I wouldn't bet this side on the money line either way. I mean, if you want to take a shot on the dog and Montana De La Rosa, judging off the layoff and the jiu-jitsu ability of Montana De La Rosa, then I don't blame you. I mean, plus 550, probably going to get closer to plus 700 by the time fight night rolls around. I don't blame anybody for taking a shot on the dog, but I wouldn't play Tatiana Suarez on the money line at all. But I do think she's the more well-rounded wrestler, and usually when you have a wrestler against a very solid jiu-jitsu artist, the wrestler's top pressure control and positioning is able to override the jiu-jitsu artist submission attempts, and I think that's what we're going to see here with Tatiana Suarez, who also has good submissions and vicious ground and pound in her own right. I like Montana De La Rosa. I think she's going to make this fight competitive, but I do think at the end of the night, the female Khabib, Tatiana Suarez, will get her hand raised and improve to 9-0 in her professional mixed martial arts career. I think she's going to eventually just tire out Montana De La Rosa with the scrambles, with the ground and pound from the top. And in the second round, she's going to ground and pound her and then eventually lock up the neck for a rear naked choke submission. So my pick is going to be Tatiana Suarez to defeat Montana De La Rosa via a second round rear naked choke. If you have to bet it, like if you feel like you have to play this fight and you don't want to be on the side of the underdog in Montana De La Rosa, I would play the under 2.5 rounds. I think it's like a minus 140 on DraftKings, or I would play Tatiana Suarez inside the distance by KO, TKO, or submission. I don't know when those odds are going to come out. They'll probably be out closer to like Wednesday or Thursday during the week, but I do like the female Khabib and Tatiana Suarez to come back and be successful in her return bout and showcase that dominant wrestling and top control and vicious ground and pound, working her way to a victory. So Tatiana Suarez to improve to 9-0 in her mixed martial arts career and defeat Montana De La Rosa via second round rear naked choke submission. All right, and now we move to the co-main event of the evening in the UFC's middleweight division. You have a battle between the number 11 ranked Andre Muniz going up against Brendan All-In Allen. This is a really solid matchup. It's a really competitive fight, and I think a lot of people are going to be writing off Brendan Allen on some aspects, and then I also think that there's a lot of people who are going to give Brendan Allen a little bit too much credit when it goes to the grappling and jiu-jitsu side of how this fight's going to play out. And I'll explain that, obviously, the further we get into the breakdown, but Muniz is one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu artists to ever grace the game of mixed martial arts. I mean, you look at the fight against Jacare Souza. Number one, he's the only man to ever submit Jacare, but not only did he submit him, he broke his arm. He fell off. He had his back with both hooks in. He fell off to one side and put Jacare in an armbar, but it was more like a key lock, kind of like an armbar and key lock or Americana hybrid, and he pushed up on it, and you heard the arm just snap, and he broke Jacare's arm. And that's really when Andre Muniz arrived onto the scene. Now, in his last fight, he took on Uriah Primetime Hall, and that was a fight where I thought Muniz was going to take down Hall, get in the top position, and immediately submit him. He took him down multiple times, was able to close the distance, get in the top position, took the back of Uriah Hall, had him in side control, had him in the mount, looked for the arm bar, looked for the rear naked choke, but a lot of the time he was just stalling and really gaining the position more than trying to go for a finish. I feel like if Andre Muniz really went for a finish in that fight, if he took the back of Uriah Hall and went to lock up a rear naked choke, if he went to a front headlock and tried to lock up a guillotine, I feel like he definitely could have gotten Uriah Hall out of there, but he more just played the safe route and wanted to win the fight on the scorecards. Yeah, at the end of the third round, he fell off to the one side and went for an armbar, the end of the second round, he fell off to one side and went for an armbar. Uriah Hall got out and then got in the top position and was grounding and pounding him to finish the round. But aside from that, I feel like there were ample opportunities for Muniz to submit Uriah Hall, but at the same time, Uriah Hall's a guy who never has been submitted in his entire mixed martial arts career, so he's not an easy guy to get out of there either. He got TKO'd by Gegard Mousasi, which was in a similar position where Muniz had success, which was on the back, but he flattened him out and TKO'd him. So Uriah Hall's never been submitted, but Muniz submitted Jacare Souza. Like I said, I think he could have submitted Uriah, but it just didn't come to pass, and he ended up winning a decision. If you look at, let's see, we're going to pull it up. You look at the rest of his record, if it'll pull up for me. Andre Muniz. Come on, for some reason, dude. I got to pick a different website. Maybe I got to use Tapology from now on. Because, man, Sure Dog is just terrible with how long it takes to load sometimes. But 23-4, 15 wins by submission, 4 by KO, TKO, and 4 decisions. So 19 out of 23 wins coming by way of finish for Sergi Pano. Andre Muniz, out of his 4 losses, all 4 losses come by way of KO, TKO. You look at his record inside the UFC. He had that unanimous decision win over Uriah Hall. He has the armbar submission in the first round over Eric Anders, an armbar submission in the first round over Ronaldo Souza, an armbar submission in the first round over Bartosz Fabinski. He's got a unanimous decision win over Antonio Arroyo back at UFC Fight Night Blachowicz versus Jacare. And then on the Contender Series, he got a first round rear naked choke. His last loss came all the way back in 2016 to Azamat Mirzakhanov, who actually fought inside the UFC. I believe he might still be on the UFC roster. That was at ICFC in October of 2016. He got knocked out in 50 seconds of the first round. Aside from that, prior to that, I should say, he had a loss back in October of 2018 to Julio Cesar dos Santos in the second round via TKO. He had a TKO in the first round to Douglas Mora at Jungle Fight 39 in May of 2012. And then before that, another loss to Julio Cesar dos Santos via TKO doctor stoppage at the end of the first round back in June of 2011. So 2 of his losses come to Julio Cesar dos Santos in his mixed martial arts career out of his 4 losses. But in the UFC, he currently holds a record of 7-0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's 5-0 inside the UFC, never lost. When you look at Brendan Allen, this guy has been hot and cold throughout his MMA career. He came into the UFC with a ton of hype, and everybody was on the side of All In. Everybody thought this guy was a future champion. He submitted Kevin Holland. Out of his 20 wins, he's got 16 by way of finish and 4 by decision. 11 wins by way of submission, 5 by KO, TKO. So you've got a combined win rate of 26 submissions overall out of the wins for Brendan Allen and Andre Muniz. I don't know why I couldn't remember the name. Out of his 5 losses, he's been TKO'd or knocked out 2 times, submitted once, and went to decision 2 times. So he's tasted all 3 levels of defeat. In terms of the wins, he's tasted all 3 levels of wins. 11 submissions, 5 TKOs, 4 decisions. His last win came over Krzysztof Jotko in the first round via rear naked choke. That was a fight where I thought Jotko was going to be able to beat Allen, and I was actually on the Jotko side as an underdog. And the minute it went to the ground, Allen was able to take the back, lock up the choke, and get the submission. It didn't even have the hooks in, but he knew he had the choke. That was an impressive win. Prior to that, a unanimous decision win over Jacob Malkoun. That was at UFC 275. In a fight where a lot of people thought Malkoun did enough to win the decision with his wrestling, but the top control of Brendan Allen, the ground and pound, the decent success he had on the feet. I feel like Brendan Allen was more active, but it was a very close fight, and I know a lot of people thought that the judges got the decision wrong. And then prior to that, a rear naked choke in the second round over Sam Alvey. The thing that worries me about the Alvey fight is, yeah, he won, but he was getting pieced up against Sam Alvey. I mean, he was getting cracked. He got rocked at a certain point. Every time he tried to close the distance, Alvey would catch him with the check hook, and he was getting hurt. He was getting rocked. And I know Alvey's got power, but for a prospect like Brendan Allen, who's not so much a prospect now, but he's on the up and up in terms of his UFC career, to get hurt like that against a guy like Sam Alvey, who hasn't had a win in the UFC in like his last 12 fights. I mean, he's on a 1, 2, 3. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Oh my God. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. Let me go from the bottom. It's a lot easier. So his last win came in August 2017 in a split decision no. Hold on. I looked at that wrong. His last win came via split decision over Jean Vellante in June of 2018. Since then, he's lost every single one of his fights besides one that went to a draw. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 losses. He's 0-8-1 in his last 9 fights in his MMA career. Overall record, not too bad, 33-18. But man, I mean, to get pieced up by Alvey, and yeah, he did catch him with a left hook, drop him, jump on him, and submit him, and he basically knocked him out with the hook. But he was getting pieced up by Alvey on the feet, and I think a lot of people give Brendan Allen a lot of credit on his striking game because of the performance he had against Punahele Soriano, which was probably the best performance of his career. But Allen is not the best striker defensively. And yes, I think he's going to be a better striker than the jiu-jitsu artist and Andre Muniz on the feet. I think the kicking game is going to be a big weapon for Allen, but he also has to be careful with how he mixes up his kicking game, because if Andre Muniz can time it and shoot a double leg, catch the kick and work a sweep and get Brendan Allen to the ground, I know Brendan Allen's a good jiu-jitsu artist. I know Brendan Allen has a lot of submissions in his own right. But I think that once Muniz gets in the top position, the top pressure and the control that this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and BJJ world champion has is going to be a level that Brendan Allen has never faced before. He's been submitted before, but it was way back in, 2016 by Trevin Giles at LFC 52. He got submitted via rear naked choke in the second round. I kind of see a similar area here. I know people are going to say Allen's going to be the better striker on the feet. That's true, but although Muniz doesn't have the most technical striking, he mixes up his game well, and I feel like even though he's not even though he's not the best striker, he's comfortable on the feet. Even against Uriah Hall, he wasn't shooting for his life. He wasn't over-exaggerating to all the strikes. He was finding the openings. He landed some good left kicks to the body against Uriah Hall. And Uriah Hall's a much better striker than Brendan Allen. Now, do I think Brendan Allen could have possibly taken down Uriah Hall and done the same thing? I do, but I like the composure that Muniz has on the feet for being so heavily reliant on his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But his top game, his mount, his side control, his side mount, if he gets the back, he can fall off to either side and lock up an arm bar. He doesn't really give you any position or any room on the ground to even work a get up, to work defense. And yes, Brendan Allen's a good grappler. Yes, he has rear naked chokes. Yes, he submitted Kevin Holland early in his UFC career. He's good on the ground. He could submit just about anybody, but Andre Muniz isn't just anybody. And I think Andre Muniz is going to exploit Brendan Allen's grappling and make you see that there are levels to the game. I think that this is a fight that's going to showcase that there's levels to this. And that's kind of how I see this fight playing out. I think Allen's going to be the better striker, but I think Muniz is going to hold his own. And eventually Brendan Allen's going to make a mistake, get taken down. Muniz is going to control on the top. Allen's going to have some good defense. I think he'll scramble. He'll look good defensively, but eventually he's going to give up his back. He's going to give up a neck, or give up his neck, I should say. And I think Andre Muniz is going to lock him up in a rear naked choke. Now, I said he was going to submit Uriah Hall, and I actually bet him to submit Uriah Hall, and he didn't get the sub. So a lot of the parlays I had for that night didn't cash. So if you aren't too confident in Muniz to be able to finish Brendan Allen, I completely understand. And you could play the money line. He was at like a minus 190 to open up, which was the best you're probably going to get him. Now he's like minus 200, minus 215. I still like it. Anything under minus 280, minus 275 for Andre Muniz this weekend is definitely a play you're going to want to look at. I also do like the Muniz by submission, but I think it's only like a minus 120 or maybe like a plus 120, somewhere around there. And the under 2.5 is probably another good bet. But again, I could see Muniz just looking for control. And if Allen wins this fight, I think the only way Allen wins this fight is by hurting him on the feet and getting a finish and potentially rocking him enough to get a submission. But even if he hurts Muniz on the feet, I don't think Allen's going to be able to submit him unless he really rocks him bad. Then I could see Allen pulling out a sub of some sort. But the control, the top pressure, the submission game, the awareness to control throughout rounds and not give up superior position by going for a submission when he doesn't really have it is something that I think makes Andre Muniz very, very dangerous. And I think he's going to roll here against Brendan Allen. He's actually one of my most confident picks on the entire card. So I'm going to go with a Sergi Pano, Andre Muniz to defeat Brendan Allen and crack his way into the top 10 of the middleweight division. I'm going to go with a second round rear naked choke. I think eventually he's just going to out-grapple him, the top pressure. Brendan Allen's going to try to shrimp his hips. He's going to give his back up. He gives his back up a lot in his fights, but he is a good scrambler, but he's going to scramble wrong one time. Muniz is going to take the neck and submit him. So my pick is Andre Sergi Pano Muniz to defeat Brendan All-In Allen via a second round rear naked choke submission, improving to 24-4 and continuing his undefeated run in the UFC. But I really like Andre Muniz on the money line, and I do like the under 2.5, but I don't love it because I could see this fight going to decision, but I do think Muniz will get the submission and defeat Brendan Allen. And now we get to the main event of the evening in the UFC's light heavyweight division between top 10 ranked contenders in the number 6 ranked Nikita the Miner Krylov going up against the number 8 ranked streaking contender, or 8 ranked streaking contender, in Ryan Superman Spann. This is an interesting one. I'm not going to say that this is the most exciting main event that we could have had on this card. I honestly would have much rather preferred Muniz versus Allen to be the main event, but I understand, based on Spann and Krylov's position in the rankings, why this is the main event. And it's two high-level guys, and I'm sure the fight is going to play out exciting, whether it's Spann who wins or Krylov. Like, I don't expect it to go the distance whatsoever, but overall, it's going to be a solid fight, I feel. I'm just not super excited for this main event. Krylov sitting at 29-9 as a professional, while Ryan Spann comes back with a record of 21 victories and 7 defeats. You look at the overall record for Nikita Krylov. We're going to pull it up real quick. Sorry, just give me a second. Hopefully it'll load for me. Load for you, boy. Let's see. Nikita Krylov. So Krylov, 29-9. Out of those 29 wins, he has, let's see, he has 27 finishes out of 29 wins. Out of his 9 losses, he's been submitted 6 times and knocked out once. So 7 out of 9 losses come by way of finish for Nikita Krylov, while 27 out of 29 wins come by way of finish for Krylov. He rarely goes to decision, and, if he's getting beat, he rarely goes to decisions. He has 2 wins by decision and 2 losses via decision. He's a killer be killed fighter, and he is technical, he is tactical. I think Krylov's a little bit better on the feet than people give him credit for. I feel like, for the most part, when people break down the game of Nikita Krylov, they think of the wrestling, they think of the grappling, they think of the top position, they think of his ability to land ground and pound and look for submissions. But Krylov is a decent striker, and it's not that he's not technical either. A lot of people in the light heavyweight division, I feel like this was a story for a long time, but it's not so much the story now. They kind of discredit the technical ability of some of these top 205ers, and Krylov is a technical striker. He has good kicks off the lead and rear leg, good front kicks to the body. His boxing is crisp and clean. I mean, it doesn't look the most technical. I feel like Spann, his striking looks better, and it's a little bit more technical than Krylov, but Krylov has good technique on the feet as well. He just has more success when it comes to the grappling, jiu-jitsu, and ground and pound realm of the mixed martial arts game, and that's something that you obviously have to take into consideration, considering he has 15 victories by way of submission, but also has 12 by KO TKO. You look at his last few fights, he had 2 back-to-back losses to Paul Craig via triangle choke at the end of the first round, and then a unanimous decision loss to Magomed Ankalaev, who many people believe should be the current UFC light heavyweight champion. Obviously went to decision with Jan Blachowicz, but the fight was a draw. And then Jamal Hill went and defeated Glover Teixeira to become the new UFC light heavyweight champion, and then he'll obviously fight Yuri Prochazka when he comes back from injury. He beat Johnny Walker via unanimous decision. He lost a split decision to Glover Teixeira, submitted Ovin St. Peru in the second round. He lost to Jan Blachowicz via a second-round arm triangle choke submission, which is something that Blachowicz doesn't do very often. He doesn't usually get too many submissions on his record, but he's been in the UFC since he was back. Well, he was in the UFC for a while, back in like 2014, 2015. He left, went over to FNG, Fight Night Global, and then came back to the UFC. Since he came back to the UFC, he's amassed a record of 4-4. So not the most successful win rate in the UFC since he's been back, but the wins that he gets are pretty dominant in most aspects. But his last 2 wins come by way of decision over Volkan Oezdemir, and then a KO in the first round over Alexander Gustafsson. Look, the win over Gustafsson is impressive, but you have to look at what time he got Gustafsson out of there. He beat him back in July of 2022, and that was a Gustafsson who was way past his prime, a Gustafsson who tried to go up to heavyweight and face Fabricio Verdum in what I believe to be a very, very favorable matchup for Gustafsson at the heavyweight division, or in the heavyweight division. and he got submitted. The minute he got taken to the ground, he got submitted and the fight was over. Couldn't stop the takedowns. And then when he fought Nikita Krylov, Krylov showcased his wrestling, showcased his striking ability, dropped him with an overhand right, I believe, and then caught him with an uppercut up the middle, which eventually put Gustafsson out of there. Gustafsson didn't really have any offense in that fight, and it was basically one-way traffic for Krylov. In the Volkan Oezdemir fight, Volkan was piecing him up on the feet. He was rocking him. He was hurting him. But Krylov weathered the storm, used his grappling, got Volkan down to the ground, controlled him in the top position, landed good ground and pound, and really was able to take over, even hurting Volkan Oezdemir on the feet with a high kick. He landed a cross with a high kick behind it. He's got very sneaky kicks. I think Krylov's boxing is good. He doesn't get enough credit for how sharp his striking is, but his bread and butter, like we already talked about, is the ground game, the wrestling, the grappling, the top pressure, grounding and pounding, looking to open up the avenue for a submission or just pounding you out on the floor. And that's what he's going to have to do against Ryan Spann. Going in against Ryan Superman Spann, Spann suffered that loss in the first round via rear naked choke to Anthony Smith. He got wobbled with a jab, then got caught with a left hook over the top of his right hand, I believe. And Anthony Smith was able to jump on him, take the back, and get the rear naked choke. Out of 21 victories, he has 6 wins by way of KO, TKO, and 12 via submission. So when you break down this main event, most of the wins for both of these guys come by way of submission. They like to grab the neck. They like to grab the arm. Ryan Spann has a very, very solid guillotine, and it's very sneaky. And based on the fact that Krylov is such a heavy grappler and wrestler, I feel like his neck is going to be there for Spann to try to grab it and take it home with him. And if he leaves his neck out for Spann, I feel like Spann can get a submission. A lot of people are probably going to be riding with the submission side of Nikita Krylov because most of his win rate and most of his success comes via the route of the grappling, the takedowns, the top pressure, the submissions. And I feel like that's an avenue that we've talked about a lot when breaking down this card. A lot of guys on this card, a lot of fighters win via their grappling. A lot of the women, a lot of the men, it's a lot of heavy grapplers and people who have a lot of success with the grappling. Spann is known as a knockout artist. He has good punching power, big power, but he can grab your neck just as quickly. And if you leave it out there in a front choke, if Spann hurts Krylov and Krylov shoots a bad takedown, Ryan Spann's going to grab that neck and lock up that palm-to-palm guillotine or the high elbow Marcellitine and get him out of there. I can easily see Ryan Spann rocking Krylov and getting a submission. I could see him catching his neck and getting a submission. Against Paul Craig, he was dominating, landing big ground and pound, controlling him on the floor. He gave up one position. Krylov got locked in a triangle, and that was it. When it comes to Ryan Spann's last few fights, he's on a 2-fight win streak. He's won 3 out of his last 5. His loss is coming to Johnny Walker via first-round TKO. Was able to hurt him with some elbows and then hammer fist to what Saif Saud said was the back of the head, and they were questionable, landing some big elbows and then eventually getting Ryan Spann out of there as he tried to shoot a takedown. And then he lost via rear naked choke in the first round to Anthony Smith. The loss to Johnny Walker came at 2:43 of round 1. The loss to Anthony Smith 3 minutes 47 seconds into the first round. He was able to defeat Iwan Kutelaba. That's a fight where I actually picked against Spann, and I picked Kutelaba to be able to out-wrestle him, grapple him, ground and pound him, and just constantly get the takedowns. And Kutelaba was looking good. He got some good takedowns. Spann stuffed a few of them, but he got in a bad scramble, left his neck out there, and Spann locked it up in a guillotine, and it was a tight guillotine. That's why I think if Krylov leaves his neck out there, it's going to be a wrap for him. Like, you cannot be lazy with the way you set up your takedowns. You have to shoot head high. You can't shoot with your head down. You can't leave your head in vulnerable positions. Kind of like the Mike Malott and Johan Liness fight. Like, Liness cannot leave his neck in a bad position because Mike Malott will grab it. The same thing goes with Ryan Spann. You leave your neck out there in a bad position, Spann's going to rip your head off. And then against Dominic Reyes, that's a fight where I was heavily on the side of Dom Reyes. I thought that he was going to be able to out-technique Ryan Spann on the feet. I thought he was going to be able to exploit some of the defensive irresponsibility and the chin issues that we seem to have seen from Ryan Spann, especially in the fight with Anthony Smith. I mean, he got rocked by a jab, got rocked by a check hook. The jab wobbled him. Even in the Dominic Reyes fight, Dominic was able to catch him with a check hook as he stepped in, and it looked to back him up and wobble him a little bit. But then that's when Ryan Spann cracked him with the jab and the right hand, but basically knocked him out with the jab. And then the right hand was just a formality, a vicious knockout over who many people believe to be an uncrowned light heavyweight champion with his performance against John Jones at UFC 247, which coincidentally was the last time we saw John Jones inside the octagon. But this is a tough fight to call because it's really going to be a story of, can Ryan Spann get Krylov out of there within the first 2 rounds? And if he can't, will Krylov dominate him? Will he take him down? Will he constantly outwork him? Will he ground and pound him? Will he land some big shots on the feet and tire out Superman and eventually either ground and pound him, hurt him on the feet, and lock up a submission and get him out of there? Like, I don't expect the fight to go to decision. This fight is a combined finish rate of 89.5%. So you're almost 9 out of 10 times going to be getting a finish, whether it's Spann knocking out Krylov or getting his neck in a guillotine, or Nikita Krylov being able to hurt him on the feet, take him down, ground and pound him, or lock up a submission in his own right. I feel like a submission is live on either side because Spann is a guy who's going to look to grab your neck, who's going to look to take you out, like we said, if he hurts you. But on the same path, I feel like Krylov is going to be more active in terms of searching for those submissions, which in turn can leave him open for counters and also leave him open for the submissions of Spann himself. If I was going to pick a win method for either guy, that is the most likely path to victory. I think the most likely way that either Spann or Krylov wins this fight is via submission. I really think that there's the submission upside on either guy. I don't think the fight goes the distance. Like I said, 9 out of 10 times, you're looking at a case where, they're going to get the opponent out of there or they're going to be finished themselves. Even the 7 losses of Ryan Spann, he's been finished in 5 out of his 7 losses. Either of these guys are kill or be killed. Spann and Krylov, they're kill or be killed, and that's what you could call this main event. Spann versus Krylov, Krylov versus Spann, kill or be killed. That's what this is, and somebody's going to get knocked out or submitted, and it's not going to go to decision. Now, do I want to jinx it? No, obviously not, but that's how I see it going down. The fact is, Ryan Spann is the sharper striker. I feel like he has better power. His technique has been sharpened up after that loss to Anthony Smith, but he does leave himself open in certain aspects. Krylov is sneaky sharp on the feet. He's sneaky sharp. He has better kicking. I feel like he has a better kicking game than Spann, and I feel like Spann has better boxing and counter ability with the hands on the feet. And we've seen in the Volkan Oezdemir fight with Nikita Krylov, like he was getting hurt and rocked multiple times in that fight. Came back, hurt Volkan Oezdemir, pushed him in, got in his face, took him down. Like, Krylov's a fighter, and I think Krylov's cardio is going to carry up way better than Ryan Spann over 5 rounds. If it gets past the midpoint of the 2nd round, gets into the 3rd round, gets into the 4th, gets into the 5th, that's always going to favor the style of Nikita Krylov because he can push a pace. He can push the grappling. He can push the top pressure. He can get in your face and continue to push the pace. Now, do I think he's going to be able to push the pace for 25 minutes? No, but I think he can push it far enough to where he could get Spann out of there because I expect Spann to fade after the midpoint of the 2nd round and going into the 3rd. I feel like Spann is good. He's sharpened up his game. His boxing has gotten better. He hasn't rushed in as much as he used to, but he still does rush in and look for a finish. He likes to really just get you out of there as quickly as he can. But another thing you have to look at is Ryan Spann said that going into this fight, this is the first time we really are going to see him train like a professional mixed martial artist. He said that before the after the Dominic Reyes fight as well, that was one of the first times he actually did a full training camp. One of the first times he actually took the fight game serious. And that's something where, do you believe what Spann says, or do you feel like he said that before because he just wanted something to say? I'm going to believe Ryan Spann and say that maybe he didn't take it serious before, because when you have the power to shut people's lights out, when you get used to having that one-touch knockout power or that combination that just puts everybody out, you kind of fall in love with that part of your game, and then you shed all the other parts of your game away and just focus the dot sight and the red eye dot sight on that one aspect of your game where you're so good at it. And you kind of forget about the parts of the game that could sharpen up your biggest weapon and also set up the smoke screens to give you an opportunity and an avenue to land your big weapon without making it so telegraphed and predictable. And I feel like that's what Ryan Spann has kind of become. And if he's taking this more serious, if he is finally taking this like a professional, I expect to see a different Ryan Spann. I expect to see the same Krylov, but Krylov has power on the feet. He has knockout ability, but I don't think he's going to want to play around on the feet with Ryan Spann too much. I see a lot of people leaning towards Krylov, and honestly, I think this is a 50-50 fight. I think if it gets past the midpoint of the 2nd round into the 3rd and so on, then obviously it would favor Nikita Krylov with the cardio, the grappling, the top pressure, the wrestling, the submission upside. But in that first round and a half, 2 rounds, Ryan Spann is live to shut Nikita Krylov down, to put him out, to finish him. And that's why if you're looking at the betting side, the only bet I would take on either side of this fight is fight doesn't go the distance or under 2.5 rounds. And judging on how the lines have been lately on DraftKings, on whatever sports book you use, that's probably going to be juiced to a minus 250, minus 300, or at least a minus 195 to minus 200. The books are getting smarter at how to line the over-unders with MMA fights. And it's actually become a little bit harder to make money betting on fights because they're getting smarter with the way that they approach these over-under lines. They're actually taking into consideration how these fighters win their last few fights. And they're doing more research and becoming more knowledgeable on the game. But there's always ways to make money. Honestly, if I'm going to tell you what to do in terms of betting this fight, I would stay away from it completely. I wouldn't touch the main event with a 10-foot pole because I could see either man finishing this fight. And I think the best way to bet the fight is fight doesn't go to decision or the under 2.5. But at the same time, I think those are going to be so heavily favored and so heavily oversaturated that you're probably not going to get good value on it. So I would stay away from it, in terms of a betting aspect. But when it comes to who I think is going to win the fight, I actually think Krylov's going to get put away here. I can see Krylov winning with the ways that I already talked about, but I feel like his defensive ability on the feet, which is something that has been a common, denominator in terms of breaking down UFC Vegas 70, I think his defense isn't the best. And when you have bad defense, which Spann has bad defense in and of himself as well, I think that the power of Ryan Spann, we saw Volkan Oezdemir hurt Nikita Krylov multiple times, wobble him, and I think Volkan has more power than Ryan Spann. I actually like Volkan Oezdemir versus Ryan Spann as a fight. I think that would be a very interesting fight for this light heavyweight division if Spann gets past Krylov. But I think eventually he's going to hurt Krylov, drop him, rock him. Krylov's going to shoot a bad takedown, and Spann's going to get the guillotine choke for a submission. I think he actually is able to submit Nikita Krylov. So I'm going to go with Ryan Superman Spann, the number, what is he ranked? 8 in the division? Let's see, the number 8 ranked light heavyweight to improve to 22-7 and submit the number 6 ranked Nikita Krylov via a second round guillotine choke. I could see Krylov winning this fight, which is why I say to stay away from it from a betting perspective. But I'm going to go with Ryan Spann to win via second round guillotine choke. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC Vegas 70 preview predictions and breakdown and my analysis of UFC Vegas 69. I will have a hype style video like I did for Makhachev and Volkanovski on my YouTube channel for the main event of UFC 2. Oh my God, I can't remember the name. UFC 285, Jones versus Gane. I'll have more hype videos for that as well. And the predictions for UFC 285 will be coming out very early next week. I cannot wait to break down that card. It is stacked from top to bottom. I mean, Rachmanov versus Jeff Neal, Dricus du Plessis versus Derek Brunson, Jones versus Gane, Grasso versus Shevchenko. I mean, the list goes on and on. Cody Garbrandt against Trevin Jones. There's so many good fights on that card, and I can't wait to get into that. If you like the Touch 'Em Up podcast, and if you support what we be putting down on this show every week, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can get this podcast anywhere you get your audio podcasts. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Stitcher, and many, many more. Your ABCs of podcast distributors, baby. I'm your host, Double M. This has been UFC Vegas 70. Spann versus Krylov, or Krylov versus Spann, preview, predictions, and breakdown. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Enjoy the fights this weekend.